plane crash is every airline's worst nightmare, and in 2025, that nightmare has already played out 3 times. On January 29th, American Airlines Flight 5342, a Bombardier CRJ-700, collided mid-air with a U.S. Army Black Hawk helicopter near Washington, D.C. Just 2 days later, on January 31st, MedJet's Flight 056, a Medevac Learjet 55, crashed shortly after takeoff in Philadelphia. A Jeju air disaster on the runway, one moment of miscalculation, grounding flights across South Korea. The headlines fade, the wreckage gets cleared, but the financial fallout, it's only beginning. Boeing stock declined by 4% in pre-market trading following the Jeju air crash in South Korea. Lawsuits pile up against manufacturers, with victims' families demanding answers. Insurance companies prepare for record-breaking payouts exceeding $5 billion. But here's what no one talks about: who really pays the price? Is it the airline, the manufacturer, the government, or is it the passengers themselves? Because no matter how much money changes hands, the ones left fighting the hardest are always the families. They face years of legal battles, corporate cover-ups, and broken promises from insurers. Some never see a single dollar of compensation. Behind every crash, there's a financial war that never makes the news, and today, we're exposing it. As we saw earlier, 3 major crashes in 2025 sent shockwaves through the industry. But beyond the media coverage, the financial consequences have only begun. When a plane crashes, the financial burden is distributed across multiple entities, each facing significant consequences. Airlines experience an immediate financial disaster. They lose $1 million worth aircraft from their fleet, leaving a mess with schedules, their stock values plummet, fleets being grounded, and a surge in cancellations as passengers lose trust. If a mechanical failure is identified as the cause, manufacturers such as Boeing, Airbus, or Bombardier come under intense scrutiny, facing massive lawsuits, regulatory investigations, and the risk of losing future aircraft orders. Insurers, while responsible for covering multi-billion-dollar payouts, rarely absorb the full loss themselves. Instead, they raise premiums, passing the costs onto airlines, which ultimately results in higher ticket prices for passengers. Meanwhile, victims' families often endure prolonged legal battles, as some receive quick settlements while others are forced to fight for years due to insurers and airlines leveraging legal loopholes to stall, deny, or minimize payouts. These crashes send ripples through the entire aviation industry, leading to stricter regulations, increased operating costs, and permanent reputational damage for the airlines involved. So, when disaster strikes, where does all the money go, and who truly bears the burden? Let's take a look at who takes the biggest hit. Aviation insurance is designed to cover the unthinkable, but when disaster strikes, it's the insurers who brace for impact. After the 2025 Washington, D.C. mid-air collision, early estimates suggest payouts could exceed $3.5 billion, making it one of the costliest air disasters in recent history. The Jeju air runway accident alone could result in $450 million in damages, with South Korean insurers now facing pressure to revise coverage policies. While insurers cover massive claims, the long-term financial burden rarely stays with them. Instead, their payouts trigger industry-wide consequences, affecting airlines, ticket prices, and global insurance rates. Following the airline disasters, global aviation insurers raised their premiums. Boeing's liability coverage costs surged by billions after mounting legal claims from multiple crashes over the past 5 years. Medevac operators will see a rise in premiums after the Philadelphia Learjet crash, straining emergency medical flights across the U.S. Higher insurance premiums inevitably drive up airline operating costs, costs that don't stop with airlines. A study by the International Air Transport Association, or IATA, found that after major crashes, ticket prices increase by an average of 6% globally as airlines compensate for insurance hikes. Fuel surcharges, baggage fees, and service costs also rise, meaning passengers ultimately pay the price. While insurers cover airlines and manufacturers, families of crash victims face an entirely different battle, one that can last years. The Air France Flight 447 lawsuit took 13 years to settle, with some families receiving far less than expected. The 2025 American Airlines lawsuit is already shaping up to be one of the longest legal battles in recent aviation history, as insurers aggressively minimize payouts. And in some cases, victims' families never receive full compensation at all. Malaysia Airlines MH370 families are still waiting, more than a decade after the plane disappeared. A single crash doesn't just affect one airline, it sends shockwaves through the entire industry. To offset legal and insurance costs, airlines raise ticket prices and fees, leaving passengers unknowingly paying for past disasters. The impact doesn't stop there. Airlines reduce operational expenses, sometimes at the cost of safety. Layoffs, deferred maintenance, and reduced pilot training all follow, deepening the long-term risks in aviation. Because in the airline business, safety and cost cutting are always in a delicate balance. Under international law, airlines must compensate victims' families, even if they weren't at fault. The Montreal Convention guarantees a minimum payout of $175,000 per passenger. But if negligence is proven, settlements can soar to $10 million per victim. After the Ethiopian Airlines 737 MAX crash, Boeing paid an estimated $144 million, but only after years of legal battles. Airlines carry liability insurance, but insurers don't just hand out blank checks. Instead, they delay payouts, minimize settlements, and sometimes deny claims outright. Some families are forced into legal battles lasting years just to receive what they are owed. And not all victims' families are treated equally. In the US, courts tend to award higher settlements, often in the millions per passenger. But in developing countries, payouts are far lower, sometimes under $20,000 for the same tragedy. Malaysia Airlines MH370 families are still waiting for compensation over a decade later. With no confirmed wreckage, insurers and airlines refuse to pay out. Some airlines offer immediate financial aid, covering funeral costs as a PR move. Others, they stall negotiations for months, forcing grieving families into drawn-out lawsuits. Malaysia Airlines delayed MH17 payouts for months, leaving families in limbo. The real battle isn't just for compensation, it's for justice, accountability, and closure. And for many, that fight is still far from over. As soon as a crash happens, finger-pointing begins. If pilot error is to blame, the airline is held accountable. If it's a mechanical failure, the manufacturer gets sued. If air traffic control or airport infrastructure played a role, governments might step in. But sometimes, no one wants to take responsibility. Take Boeing's 737 MAX crisis. 2 deadly crashes, one in 2018, another in 2019. At first, Boeing blamed the pilots. But leaked reports showed something else, a software flaw, one Boeing knew about. For years, families fought in court. Eventually, Boeing settled, $2.5 billion, one of the biggest aviation payouts in history. But not every case ends with a billion-dollar check. Take Malaysia Airlines Flight MH370. The plane vanished in 2014. To this day, some families haven't received a cent. Why? Because insurers and airlines refuse to pay out without confirmed wreckage. No wreckage, no settlement. Even when families win in court, the fight doesn't end. Because insurers, they don't like losing. Sometimes, governments step in. But instead of helping families, they turn it into a political fight. Take Ukraine International Airlines Flight 752. It was shot down by Iran's military in 2020. 176 innocent people killed. Iran denied responsibility for months. Families wasted years for compensation. And when Iran finally agreed to pay, only $150,000 per victim, which was far less than similar cases. The same happened with Malaysia Airlines Flight MH17. 298 people were killed. It was shot down over Ukraine by Russian-backed separatists. Years later, some families are still fighting for compensation because when politics get involved, victims' families don't just fight airlines, they fight entire governments. A plane crash isn't just a financial disaster, it's a catastrophic blow to public trust. Passengers cancel flights, the media runs non-stop coverage, lawsuits pile up. For some airlines, one disaster is enough to take them down. Others, they manage to recover. Some even come back stronger. But how? How do airlines turn a tragedy into a comeback story? Let's break it down. The way an airline responds immediately after a crash determines its fate. Some airlines take responsibility, offering transparency, compensation, and open communication. Others, they deflect, delay, or deny. And history has proven one thing: the airlines that own the crisis recover faster. The ones that hide behind corporate statements, they face years of backlash. Take United Airlines Flight 3411 from 2017. A passenger was dragged off a plane due to overbooking. United initially defended the crew's actions. The backlash? It was instant and brutal. The airline lost $1 billion in stock value overnight. Only after the CEO publicly apologized did United begin to recover. Compare that to Southwest Airlines Flight 1380 from 2018. An engine exploded mid-flight, killing a passenger. Southwest immediately addressed the crisis. Families were compensated. The airline was fully transparent in the investigation. What was the result? Southwest maintained public trust. Passengers kept flying. So, lesson here is: take responsibility, take action, or take the consequences. A crash doesn't just damage an airline's reputation, it destroys billions in market value overnight. In 2025, a string of air disasters wiped out billions in stock value. Boeing has lost more than $23 billion over the last few years. American Airlines stock dropped by 6% due to its recent crash. Jeju Air shares fell as much as 15.7% to 6,920 won, marking their lowest point since the company's listing in 2015. But here's the real problem. The financial hit isn't just panic-driven, it triggers long-term damage. Airlines' liability insurance surges by billions. Insurance premium spikes to unexpected levels. However, passengers pay the price. Ticket fares increase to offset skyrocketing costs. Some airlines recover, others never regain investor trust. The question isn't who takes the biggest hit, it's who can survive it. A plane crash can be a death sentence for an airline, but history has shown that some companies find a way back. Japan Airlines Flight 123, 1985, the deadliest single aircraft crash in history. 520 people died. Public trust collapsed. The airline faced massive lawsuits, but Japan Airlines rebuilt its reputation. It invested heavily in safety, overhauled operations, and became one of the world's safest airlines. United Airlines after 9/11. Two of United's planes were hijacked in the attacks. Passenger confidence plummeted. United declared bankruptcy in 2002. But instead of fading, United restructured, cut costs, and merged with Continental Airlines. Today, it's one of the largest airlines in the world. Air France Flight 447, 2009. A flight from Rio to Paris crashed into the Atlantic. All 228 passengers died. The airline faced massive scrutiny, but instead of downplaying the tragedy, Air France invested in pilot training and automation. It turned safety improvements into a selling point, and it worked. Air France recovered. What's the takeaway? Survival isn't about luck, it's about action. Not every airline survives a major disaster. Pan Am Flight 103, 1988. A terrorist bombing destroyed the aircraft over Scotland. Lawsuits, security failures, and financial struggles followed. Pan Am never recovered. By 1991, it was gone. Malaysia Airlines, 2014. Two tragedies in 4 months. Flight MH370 vanished. Flight MH17 was shot down over Ukraine. The financial damage? Too severe to recover from. By 2015, Malaysia Airlines was forced into government ownership. Some airlines recover, others don't. The difference? Leadership, crisis management, and the ability to regain trust. A single plane crash can shake the entire aviation industry. Stocks plummet, lawsuits pile up, insurance rates soar, and yet, while corporations recover, Families are left fighting for justice that may never come. So what will it take for real change? How many more billion-dollar lawsuits? How many more years of courtroom battles? And more importantly, how many more lives lost before safety becomes the true priority? If this video opened your eyes, share it, spread awareness, and ask yourself, who really pays the price for every plane crash? Subscribe for more deep dives into the unseen economics of the world. Comment below, what do you think needs to change in aviation safety?